The phone call echoed in Samar's ears, reverberating through his mind like a ghostly whisper that refused to fade away. It was a sound that seemed to come from another world, a world where the dead could reach out to the living. His sister Nidhi, dead for a year, had called. The call log showed her name, the timestamp marking the moment his reality shattered. It was impossible, yet there it was, staring back at him from the screen. Her voice, filled with urgency and fear, sent chills down his spine. It was as if she was reaching out from beyond the grave, her words laced with a desperation that he had never heard before. The memory of her voice haunted him, echoing in the silence of his room. He had shared the bone-chilling experience with his best friend, Rahul. They had known each other since childhood, and there was no one else he trusted more with this terrifying secret. The look on Rahul's face had mirrored his own, disbelief and fear.
Rahul, I swear it was Nidhi. I know it sounds crazy, but I heard her. It was her voice. Clear as day. Her voice. It was so real. She sounded scared, like she was in trouble. I can't just ignore this, Rahul. I need to know what's going on.
I believe you, man. It's just, I don't know. Maybe there's some explanation. Maybe it's a prank or some kind of glitch. But we'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. We'll get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes. We'll find out the truth, even if it means facing our worst fears.
Rahul, skeptical yet supportive, agreed to help unravel this terrifying mystery. He knew how much Nidhi had meant to Samar, and he couldn't let his friend face this alone. Together they would confront whatever dark forces were at play. Samar couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The call had been too real, too vivid to be a mere figment of his imagination. He felt a growing sense of dread, as if he was being pulled into a nightmare from which there was no escape. The call had been real. The evidence was right there on his phone, a stark reminder that the boundaries between the living and the dead were not as clear-cut as he had once believed. He had heard his sister's voice. It was unmistakable, filled with the same warmth and love he remembered, but also tinged with a fear that chilled him to the bone. What could have happened to her? Why was she reaching out to him now? His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. He knew he couldn't rest until he had answers. The thought of his sister in distress, even in death, was unbearable. He had to do something, anything to help her. He was going to find out the truth. No matter how terrifying, no matter how dangerous, he would uncover the mystery behind that chilling phone call. For Nidhi, for himself, and for the peace that had been shattered by that haunting voice from the past. The next morning, Samar and Rahul went to the police station. The air was thick with tension as they walked through the dimly lit corridors, the weight of the previous night's events hanging heavily over them. They requested a copy of Nidhi's accident report. The officer at the counter eyed them suspiciously, as if gauging their intentions. The officer on duty was reluctant at first. His stern expression suggested he was not in the mood for any additional work, especially not for two anxious individuals. After some persuasion, he finally agreed. Samar and Rahul had to explain their situation multiple times, each word carefully chosen to avoid any suspicion.
All right, here's the report. The officer's voice was gruff, and his eyes never left theirs, as if he was trying to read their minds. Just be careful with it, okay? He handed over the document with a reluctant sigh, his fingers lingering on the paper for a moment longer than necessary.
As Samar scanned the report, a chill ran down his spine. The words on the paper seemed to blur as his mind raced to make sense of the information. The report mentioned Nidhi was alone in the car. This detail struck him like a bolt of lightning, causing his heart to pound in his chest. However, Samar distinctly remembered her mentioning Rahul dropping her home that night. The memory was vivid, etched into his mind with the clarity of a recent event.
Rahul, why isn't your name in the report? Samar's voice was filled with confusion and a hint of accusation, his eyes searching Rahul's face for answers. You were with her that night, right? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications and unspoken fears.
Doubt crept into Samar's mind. Was Rahul hiding something? The possibility gnawed at him, each passing second amplifying his unease. The room seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. Samar's thoughts raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the night, but the more he tried, the more elusive the truth seemed. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Later that day, Samar decided to visit the site of Nidi's accident. The memory of the incident was still fresh in his mind, and he felt an inexplicable pull towards the place where it all happened. He needed answers, or perhaps some form of closure. It was a desolate stretch of road, cutting through a dense, dark forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, disappearing into the misty distance. An eerie silence hung in the air. It was the kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. The only sound was the rustle of leaves and the chirping of crickets. It was a stark contrast to the bustling city life Samar was used to. Here in the heart of the forest, time seemed to stand still.
This place, it feels so wrong. Like someone's watching me. Samar's voice trembled as he spoke, his eyes darting around nervously. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and he couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over him.
As Samar stood there, lost in thought, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly, and he wrapped his arms around himself in an attempt to ward off the chill. The forest, once a place of beauty and tranquility, now felt menacing and foreboding. It felt like someone was watching him. The sensation was so strong that he found himself glancing over his shoulder repeatedly, half expecting to see a pair of eyes staring back at him from the shadows. He could have sworn he heard whispers. They were faint, almost indistinguishable from the rustling leaves, but they were there. The whispers seemed to be coming from all around him, echoing through the trees and sending chills down his spine. His heart raced, and he quickly left the forest. The sense of dread was too much to bear, and he broke into a run, not stopping until he was back on the main road. His breath came in ragged gasps, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. That night, Samar received another call. He was sitting in his dimly lit apartment, trying to make sense of the day's events, when his phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet room, and he hesitated for a moment before answering. This time, it was an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the screen. Who could it be? With a deep breath, he answered the call, bracing himself for whatever was to come.
Hello, can you hear me?
A faint voice whispered on the other end.
Samar, help me.
Samar's blood ran cold. It was Nidi's voice. Before he could speak, the call disconnected. He tried calling back, but the number was unreachable. Fear gnawed at him. He needed answers. He decided to confide in Rahul about the strange occurrences. However, Rahul was nowhere to be found. He wasn't answering his calls or messages.
Where could he be at this hour? I need to find him.
The mystery deepened, and Samar's determination to uncover the truth grew stronger. Desperate, Samar went to Nidi's room.
I remember her mentioning a string of harassing messages she had received before her death.
He found her old phone and scrolled through the messages.
My blood boiled as I read through the threatening and abusive texts.
He noted down the number and decided to use his connections. Rahul's father owned a telecom company. He could easily trace the owner of the number.
To my shock, the number was registered to none other than Rahul.
Betrayal and fear coursed through Samar. Why would Rahul do this?
Why would Rahul do this?
He rushed to Rahul's house, his mind racing with questions. The house was eerily quiet. He found the spare key where it always was, under the flower pot. As he stepped inside, he noticed a faint light emanating from Rahul's room. He slowly pushed the door open. What he saw made his blood run cold. A laptop lay open on the bed and a video was playing. It was the recording of a CCTV camera from the night of Nidi's accident. The video showed Rahul arguing with Nidi in the car. It was clear that Rahul was inebriated. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the steering wheel, causing the car to swerve and crash. Samar watched in horror as the video ended with a chilling image of Nidi's lifeless body.
He couldn't believe his eyes. Rahul, his best friend, had killed his sister and covered it up. But why?
As if on cue, a cold wind swept through the room, making the laptop flicker and shut down. Samar felt a presence behind him. He slowly turned around, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing in the doorway was a spectral figure. It was Nidi, her face pale and her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and rage. She moved towards him, her translucent hand reaching out.
Samar, he took everything from me. He made me suffer. Now it's his turn.
Terrified, Samar stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The room plunged into darkness. Samar scrambled to his feet and ran. He could hear Nidhi's chilling laughter echoing behind him. He didn't stop running until he reached his car. Gasping for breath, he fumbled for his keys and started the engine. As he sped away into the night, he glanced into the rearview mirror.
Oh no.
Sitting in the back seat, her eyes fixed on him with an icy stare, was Nidhi. The chilling image was burned into his mind. He had uncovered the truth, but at what cost? His nightmare was far from over.